First flame. Why do we call Pentecost an act of radical inclusion and a break from the past? In Acts 1 and 2, the roaring wind and tongues of fire mark more than a miracle. They symbolize the tearing down of walls. Jerusalem during Pentecost was crowded with pilgrims from across the Mediterranean: Parthians, Elamites, Arabs, North Africans, Romans, and Jews of the diaspora. In a world defined by language barriers, ethnic suspicion, and divisions between Jew and Gentile, slave and free, and male and female, this moment declared that God's Spirit was no respecter of boundaries. The miracle of tongues was not only spiritual, it was social revolution. Everyone heard the gospel in their own native language, affirming dignity and belonging without demanding cultural erasure. By Acts 19 in Ephesus, the Spirit's fire literally ignites again, far beyond Jerusalem, showing that Pentecost is not a one-time event, but a wildfire spreading across ethnic, cultural, and religious borders. Ephesus, famous for its Temple of Artemis and as a hub of trade and philosophy, epitomized diversity with oppressive inequality. The Spirit's arrival there confirmed that God's kingdom was inherently multi-ethnic and boundary-crossing. Today, radical inclusion means churches must actively break barriers, embracing multilingual worship, challenging nationalism and monoracial dominance, and standing with all immigrants and refugees. Pentecost proclaims that no culture has a monopoly on God's voice. None. Every accent, every dialect, every people belongs not as guests, but as co-heirs in the household of God. Contemporary scholars have also addressed these first chapters of Acts and radical inclusion. Craig S. Keener, professor of biblical studies at Asbury Theological Seminary and author of the monumental four-volume Acts, an exegetical commentary, highlights that Luke's long list of nations in Acts 2 follows an ancient literary style of ethnographic catalogues. However, Luke utilizes this style to present Pentecost as a new age in the gathering of all nations, unlike the Roman Empire, underscoring the universal scope of the Spirit's work. C. Cavan Rowe, professor of New Testament at Duke Divinity School and author of World Upside Down, Reading Acts in the Greco-Roman Age, goes even further. He argues that Pentecost inaugurates a new kind of political community in the world. The church is an alternative city-state in which diversity in language is not a cause for division, but a spirit-given unity, directly challenging the heavy assimilationist practices of the Roman Empire to make all citizens the same. In summary, the new way challenges the past, present, and future by radically embracing inclusivity and strongly abandoning adherence to the old law and king-centered empires. Second flame. Why is healing at the gate paramount? In Acts 3, the healing of the beggar who cannot walk at the temple gate was not only physical restoration, it was social reintegration. In ancient Judaism, disability usually meant exclusion from temple worship and social life. Thus, one was reduced to begging and stigmatized as cursed. By lifting up the beggar, Peter and John restored not just his legs, but also his dignity and access to community. The beggar moved from the margins to the center, from the gate to the temple itself. Other healings in Acts: paralyzed Aeneas, Acts 9, lifeless Tabitha, Acts 9, the disabled man in Lystra, Acts 14, and the sick of Malta, Acts 28, show the same flame of healing. The gospel restores those ignored or cast aside. In the ancient culture of Rome, the sick and poor were almost always abandoned. God's healing was not only about medicine, but also about value. It announced that no life was beneath God's concern. Today, healing may not manifest as miracles. Instead, it is represented by churches that run free clinics for the uninsured, build ramps for those with mobility challenges, offer recovery programs for addiction, and create safe spaces for mental health struggles. Just as the beggar was restored to dignity at the temple gate, so modern faith communities proclaim, "You are not forgotten. You belong here. Your place is not at the gate, but at the table." Scholars of Acts see healing as disruptive of the Roman and Jewish culture. Craig S. Keener points out that beggars at temple gates were strategically positioned because almsgiving was a key act of Jewish piety. By healing the man, the apostles disrupted a deeply ingrained religious rhythm, transforming him from a passive recipient of charity into an active witness of God's power. And C. Kevin Rowe notes that Acts consistently portrays Christian healing as part of its new politics. The apostles enact persuasion and restoration, unlike Roman leaders who used physical force and radical exclusion. Non-citizens had zero rights. Healing stories are radical political statements, for in God's reign, dignity and wholeness replace marginalization and abandonment.